Alrighty, so today I'm going to be going over every single class, what makes a good class, what type of abilities we're looking at or looking for when we're looking for strong PvE damage, strong PvP, and what you should be looking for in guild battles. And I'll also be going over some really basic talking about some of each class's best moves and why they're good and why some of them are not so good. And hopefully that'll give you a better idea as to what you should be playing and will help influence you. So I'm going to be starting with Soldier. I'm going to go Soldier, Lancer, Archer, Mage, Cleric, and then I'm going to be swapping over and doing Rook, Berserker, Treasure Hunter, Ninja, and Morpher. I'll try to create timestamps and all that stuff so that you can jump ahead to whatever you're wanting to look for. So Soldiers are excellent. They're probably one of the best classes in the entire game. They have some really incredibly strong moves for high damage. And so how do you, I guess I should go over how do you even determine what a move, what makes a good move for good damage. So basically anything that dual scales, so if you click on this one, see how it says that it uses the attack and the defense? Anything that scales with more than one thing is good. And preferably you want to scale with defense. And now or magic defense, it doesn't really matter, but you want to scale with a defensive stat. And the reason why is because the game does not reduce your damage as much when you have high defense. For example, if you're like a 1 million attack and 1 million magic attack archer, the game automatically cuts your damage by a percentage because you have 2 attack stats. But if you have like 1 mil, this is just a testing set because I'm going to build some stuff out for you. But if you have really high defense and really high attack, the defense stat stays at 100% and the attack stat gets reduced. So overall you're going to have higher stats. So what you want is you want classes that have high dual scaling. You're also looking at high ability power, and you're looking at multiple attacks. You want to go as high in the ability power and as many attacks on a dual scaling move as possible. That's for your PvE. Now what you're looking for PvP is anything that pierces. So for example, Rage Slash here, it says it penetrates damage reduction. See that? Damage reduction and damage reflection. So that means that if you have a defensive proc, I'm just gonna select this one. So for example, this one reduces or reflects physical and magical damage, but it does not nullify physical damage. Now that means that if this procs against Rage Slash, it's not gonna protect you because Rage Slash pierces reflection, pierces damage reflection, which means that proc basically does nothing. So you need, in order to defend against this type of proc, you would need a physical null, which I have. See, nullifies physical damage. That will protect you. So what you're looking for when you're looking for PvP and you're fighting other players is you want to look for moves that ignore some form of defensive proc. There's a lot of them. We're going to go over a couple of the big ones, but yeah, that's one of the big ones. And then for guild battles, I won't touch on guild battles too much today because there's just so much in guild battles. But the biggest things that we're looking for is we're looking for forms of control, and we're looking for forms of unigain. For example, Charisma is a move that increases your allies' Unison gauge by 5. Now every class can use the basic cheer, but soldier's unique because they get a second one. So you get 2 abilities that can increase uni gauge. And you can go a step further and you can add something like, if I could find it, that would be great. Inspiring sword. This one increases the uni gauge of all your allies. So we're looking for some form of uni control, whether it's uni gaining, like gaining unison for the team, gaining unison for your individual person. For example, Glistening Edge is a fantastic move because it increases your unison gauge by a massive amount, especially when you use it a second time or in conjunction with another ability, by 8. And you can awaken it to make it go a little bit more, I think. But the idea is that you want some form of uni control. So you want a uni down, you want protection, or you want some kind of versatility. For example, soldiers have fierce encouragement, which I'm going to go over all of that. But those are like some of the things that you're looking at when you're looking at a class. What abilities do they bring to the table that make them strong? And so when we're going over soldier, I'm going to make a basic PvE, PvP set, and some other, I'll make a simple guild battle set because soldiers use so much. But soldiers are really, really versatile. They can play basically in every aspect of the game extremely well. They play in PvE really well because they have tons of dual scaling high attack moves. They basically have no downsides. They're great in PvP, and they're almost required in guild battles. Not quite, but almost. The only downside to soldier is they're a little bit more on the expensive side, generally speaking, and that's because they have 2 different weapons that they use. Generally, you're going to be running with swords or axes, and because some weapons, some swords and axes, don't like to scale both your axes and your swords, you're going to be at a disadvantage. So it could potentially be more expensive, but not necessarily. So like for example, this one scales light weapons, but I'm pretty sure I've got one that does not scale. This one. So this one scales neutral swords, which means that it needs to match this element and it needs to be a sword. So right there, that's basically its only disadvantage. Now, when you're looking for monsters, when you're actually like spawning, you're going to look for monsters that have attack and defense. Something like this in the top right. You're looking for the attack stat and the defense stat. All right. So I'm going to go over a basic PvE set that makes soldiers really, really strong. So some of your abilities, as you can see, are blacked out, and that's because it requires something. So this one is usable only if there's a sword in the main slot, which I do not have. So let me go do that. Just equip a sword. So generally speaking, when you're running in PvE, you just want highest damage. Blooming Blackout is fantastic, and a little bit more on the expensive side, but it's really good. Vigilance is really good, and notice that Blooming Blackout is a dual scaling move. I believe Vigilance is also a dual scaling move. No, it is not. What am I thinking of? Ah, this one. Crystal Blade, dual scaling move, and it slows the enemies down, which is great. The enemies aren't attacking you. That's always a plus. Now you can use Ether Exchange, which is actually a mage ability, on every single class. It's right here. And that helps you get cost if you need additional cost. But I find that each class's ability to gain cost, they get their own one. This one's Pride. I find that that's good enough. And I'm also going to I like running Charisma personally, because if your team has uni, then you're probably good. And I'll also throw on the cheer. Now, if you find that you're dying a lot, and you can just throw on whatever weapon abilities you have. The weapon abilities aren't a huge deal when it comes to PvE, because honestly, none of them really dual scale. It's not that big of a deal. If you find yourself dying a lot, I would recommend coming over here and grabbing a barrier. Against most enemies, it'll protect you against most of their hits. It won't protect you against percent hits, but it'll protect you against a lot of the damage that'll come your way. So this is a pretty solid set for PvE. Now we're going to swap over to PvP. Not much changes. I'm going to grab Rage Slash. Actually, I take that back. I'm completely wrong. A lot of things changes. So we're grabbing Rage Slash because it pierces damage reduction and damage reflection, and it's a pretty fast move. We're grabbing Vigilance because it is an extremely fast move. It pierces nullification and invulnerability, which is great. It taunts the enemies, which is great for protecting your team, and it also reduces their ability to gain cost. And lastly, it protects you against 30% of the damage incoming, which is a percentage damage. So like, let's say that they're going to do 100,000 damage to you. It literally removes 30% of that. So they're only going to do 75k. A fantastic, absolutely fantastic move. I would also recommend, if you find yourself getting uni down a lot, you can use Fierce Encouragement, which is a great ability. I would also recommend Brave Introduction. It helps protect your team, and it taunts. And I personally like also going Iron Fortress because it also reduces base damage that you take by 40%. So if you're using Vigilance and Iron Fortress fast enough, then you can basically continuously have between 30 and 40% damage reduction. And then what you're looking for in an aura, like one of the weapon abilities, is something that nullifies, penetrates nullification, or does some type of uni control. That's generally what you're looking for. But this is a pretty solid setup, I'd say, for most players. Now you can run a lot of other things. If you're running axes in your main slot, unfortunately you don't get a lot of PvE benefits, but for PvP, I'd recommend this ability here because it penetrates, and it does pretty good damage. Thunder Axe is also not too bad if I remember, yeah, because it provokes. But generally, I would recommend sticking with something like this. This is a pretty solid set. Alrighty, and lastly, I'm going to show you a quick guild battle set, just because soldiers are used everywhere for guild battle. We're going to use Charisma, and I just had Brave, and we're going to use... So this is a excellent building frontline composition. You have uni protection for the whole team, you have taunts to protect your team, and you have technically 3 points of uni gauge gain, because Pride also increases uni gauge for all allies by 3. I would also recommend, if you're doing more damage, to run something like Blooming Blackout instead here, and depending on what else you need, I would just run Crystal Blade, but it really depends. If you're running more damage, I would run this. Blooming Blackout's great because it also increases your uni gauge gain of all allies. So pretty solid set. Again, Soldier is one of the best, if not the best, classes in the game. Alrighty, so now we're going to move on to Lancer. Lancer's a pretty sad class, if I'm being honest. They do not benefit from a lot of the dual scaling stuff. They have some dual scaling abilities, but honestly, they don't have enough. And generally, they're very weak. Dragon Bite is not bad. Grand Impact is not bad, but you need an axe for the main slot of Grand Impact. Apologies. And honestly, these ability powers are really weak compared to a lot of other classes. In general, the cost of these abilities are too high, and they just don't do enough damage. So for PvE, Lancer is one of the worst classes. It could be worse. You could be an archer or a ninja, but generally Lancer is really bad, and I would not recommend Lancer to new players, basically at all. I would recommend learning them because you can play them in guild battles. They are really good in some areas of PvP. They get some really unique abilities. Lance Flash is fantastic. Here, let me just swap around my abilities so I can get some of these in. But a general set for a PvP set, if you're looking to do that, I would recommend, this is Dragon Knight's Cry is their version of Ether Exchange. So this is how you'll get your uni. If I can, thank you, I can actually grab it. Lion's formation is fantastic. It just slows down the enemies from gaining uni. You know, if they can't uni, they're not going to be doing as much damage generally. Of course, they can still kill you, but it's you're a little bit safer. Lance Flash is fantastic. It's basically like Guard. It reduces Guard, basically protects you for 5 seconds from dying. Now you can still die depending on how much damage the enemies have, but it can protect you. This one basically does the same thing, but at the end of the guard, then you actually attack the enemies. So a little bit better there. And I would recommend running Master Lancer's Cry. It reduces Unison gauge gain, similar to Lions, and it also decreases their uni gain. So you're reducing their unison and slowing them down. Can't go wrong with that. And then Rage Break is probably the next greatest ability. Yeah, there's nothing really else that I can say about Lancers. They're just really unfortunate. Now in guild battles, Lancers are really good, but you're basically never running damaged Lancer. You're only running a slowing Lancer. And because you're never running a slow Lancer, you can play Lancer with basically no weapons. So there's no point in playing Lancer in guild battle with damage, because you just don't have the damage to play it. It's just not worth it. It's a really bad class to play. If I'm being completely honest. This is a pretty solid frontline set to play in guild battles. Again, Lancers are fantastic in guild battles. They can be countered, so they're not top tier, but they are pretty darn good. In the PvP and guild battle areas, Lancers shine the brightest. Their PvE is absolutely horrendous, and I would never recommend players pick Lancer. Speaking of never picking a class, let's talk about archers. Archers are extremely interesting. They have really fast abilities. Lancers have really fast abilities. That's what makes them great for PvP. But if we're talking about fast abilities, archers also have lots of fast abilities. And generally speaking, archers are absolutely horrible when it comes to PvE. They can be good in PvP, and for guild battles, they're pretty bad there as well. And they really don't have a lot of redeeming factors. If I would recommend players don't play a class, it is archers. And it is because of that percent damage cut that we talked about earlier. So because you're scaling off of attack and magic attack, you're scaling off of both of them. The way that the damage calculations work for Unison League is they're cutting your damage by a flat percentage. So even if you have more attack and more defense, or more attack and more magic attack than a soldier, you can still be doing significantly less damage, specifically because they scale with defense, and the defense doesn't get that same damage cut that attack and magic attack stats do. It's really unfortunate, as Archer is probably the most expensive class in the entire game. So not only is it the most expensive class, it's the hardest class to survive in when you're doing really difficult PvE. It's extremely difficult to build high enough damage to do great damage in PvP. It's not worth it in guild battles, hardly ever. And at the end of the day, after spending all of that money, you get basically no returns. So it is a really bad class. Overall, I would not recommend. Now, can Archer be good? The great thing about Unison League, any class can be good. Just if you're a new player and it's your first time playing this game, just pick any other class. Trust me. Just don't pick Archer, okay? I'm just gonna go over a really brief PvE set for you. These two abilities are the best in my opinion. They're both pretty fast, and they're pretty consistent. Arrow strength and deadly, those are some good ones. Now, because most people are playing Archer and they have lower defense or magic defense stats, I almost always recommend running a barrier for yourself. And honestly, you may want to run a healing ability on top of this as well. Just running recover is pretty fast, and it can cleanse your ailments. This is a pretty good set, to be honest, for PvE. There are other abilities. I mean, that dual scale Raptor Break's not bad. Assault Mirage, again, not bad. It just, the success rate of a lot of these is lower. Can they be good? Absolutely. But generally, I would not recommend playing an Archer just in general. You're going to be stuck with a lot of older abilities. Now, if we're doing PvP, they do have quite a few good, strong abilities for PvP. Sniping Shot is probably the hardest ability in the entire game to defend against, because you need to double proc nulls, and you need to proc one magic null and one physical null, so that makes them extremely strong, just that one alone. They get this guy, Double Violet, which you can attack the enemy all day long and they will never gain Unison, because it prevents Unison gauge fill activations when you attack them. You're not going to be, if you're fighting a good player, you're not going to be doing any damage with this. But on the off chance that they don't proc, it can do good damage. And then these abilities are also pretty good. I would just stick with something like this. Now, if you're running in a guild battle setting, I'd probably throw in Division Strategy. It can be super clutch, especially if the enemies throw a field that prevents you from gaining Unison. It can be archers having the ability to protect your ally field can be extremely strong. Again, though, I would not recommend playing Archer just in general. It's just a really hard class. Not saying it can't be done. It is done really well in by a lot of top players. It's just extremely hard, and you have to be a mega whale. You can't go half into Archer. All right, so we're talking about mages now, so we can get off of Archer. Mages are fan-freaking-tastic. If you're talking about joining Unison League and picking a class, mages are probably one of the most consistent classes. They're extremely strong in a lot of ways. And honestly, I would recommend playing Mage to almost everyone. either mage or soldier. Now, the only difference between mage and soldier is depending on which weapons you choose. Mage used to scale only on their staves, but now they scale on books and relics as well, which gives them access to a lot more of the secondary classes. The biggest disadvantage to mage before was that mages couldn't scale into any other classes really well. I mean, they could do berserkers, but that was about it. Now, if you play a mage, specifically a book and relic mage, you can also play Berserkers, and you can play Morphers, and you can play even Rooks and other more bizarre classes. And you can also play the Cleric class. You know, there's a lot of flexibility there. I would personally recommend playing mage in the beginning a little bit to see, because generally speaking mages will be a little bit cheaper than soldiers, but not necessarily. And if you're going between mage or soldier, it's really which one do you like more. I personally find that mages have a natural ability to survive more, and that's because you get Time Spellbook as one of your main damaging weapons, or main damaging abilities. I need to put on a book for this, but it is a lifesteal ability. So when you attack with it, you're basically guaranteed to full heal, which could be super useful. I mean, if the enemy percent hits you down to like 1 HP, as a soldier, the only way that you're healing that is if you attack and you're proccing a healing ability. But with mages, they can just use Time Spellbook and they just full heal. You know, you can't really go wrong. Mages also get the advantage of, I don't know if I can find it here, but they get the advantage of having a one of their passive abilities, like one of these, gives them tons of element attack, like base element attack. It's like 5 for every class except for star, which is 3, which is crazy. So they're already doing more percent damage to PvE stuff. So you can't really go wrong with mages, to be honest. But let me build a PvE set for you. We're gonna throw on a book. That is good. All right, grab a Time Spellbook, grab an Arcana, and I guess I should go over these. So Time Spellbook, you got your magic attack and your magic defense scaling. So when you're building a lot of these classes, it's going to be attack and defense, or magic attack and magic defense for dual scaling. So this one's a magic attack, magic defense scaling. And so I'm going to run Time Spellbook, which is a fantastic move. And I'm also going to run Arcana World, which is basically gives you elemental attack, which is fantastic against basically everything. I'm also going to be running Trance Magic Wall, which is one of their versions of a cost recovery. You can also run Fanatic Soul, fantastic ability as well, because it gives your team crit damage, which is, you really can't go wrong with that. And then I would go Lunatic, something like this, and depending on what else you're wanting, I would personally run something like Weakened, this guy, as your third damage ability, and I would just spam Lunatic Ray and Time Spellbook as your main abilities, as your main damaging abilities. Now, if you're running PvP, we're going to change this up a little bit because I need Miserable Disaster. That is a staff only weapon, so I'm going to grab staff. And remember, we're looking for piercing moves, and mages, thank goodness, have some of the best in the entire game. So instead of running Fanatic for the damage in PvE, I'm going to run the Trance Magic Wall for the defense, because it gives me Reflection, which is a form of damage reduction. I'm going to run Miserable Disaster. We don't need Arcana World because it doesn't do anything against players. Starburst. So this ability pierces. Basically, the only way that you can protect is if you null proc. It pierces damage reduction and damage reflection, and it AoEs. So if you've ever gone into like a Colo match and you just get one shot by a mage and he kills 3 enemies, it was probably Miserable Disaster, because it's a really fast ability and it hits 3 enemies. Starburst is an excellent ability, basically does the exact same thing, but it only targets 1 player instead of 3 players. And then the other ability, really you don't need too much more. I'd probably run Cheer, and then Meteor Strike for like a really fast ability. For example, if you used a bunch of unisons and then you use that, it can be really good. But I'm gonna throw on Hanged Man just in case the enemies uni and they buff up a lot. Hanged Man will reverse all of those buffs as long as they don't have karma protection. This is a pretty solid, but there's a lot of abilities that are excellent. Like Suicide Block applies insanity, so the enemies can't even do anything. I mean, Diminish will time slice them, time extend disadvantage buffs, which is, I mean, just super good. Ancient Spell is one of those abilities that doesn't look super good, but it can be extremely powerful. Basically, if you don't get it hit for like 3 seconds, then you do a massive amount of damage generally, or they'll proc and you'll basically do no damage. So it's a win-win. And then of course, Ominous Omen, another fantastic ability. Let's say that one idiot on your team attacks a person on the enemy team, and you think that they probably just got uni. You can Ominous Omen them, and they just lost 30 uni, so they're not even close. Like Cheer or Charisma isn't going to help them in the slightest. They're going to need a ton of uni in order to get back to 100. And then when we're talking about guild battles, mages are fantastic. You're basically running the same thing as before. I'll keep in Ominous Omen just in case, but I'm going to throw on Lunatic, and I'm also going to throw on, I would throw on Time Spellbook, and then I would have Cheer. So this would be a pretty standard setup as well. Just imagine that I have Time Spellbook instead of Miserable Disaster right here. Time Spellbook. That's a pretty standard set. I mean, there's a lot of other things you can do, like we talked about, the Hangman, Ancient Spell for more damage, if you find that you can't one-shot the crystal as well. So there's a lot of flexibility there. All right, let's chug right along. We're going to Cleric. Cleric is a super weird class. They're absolutely horrible when it comes to PvE because they do basically no damage. Their abilities that dual scale are just super awful. I mean, this one only hits 3 times and has extremely low ability power. So even though they do dual scale, not super great. Wouldn't recommend for damage. If you're looking for survivability, there are better classes like we talked about Mage. We'll talk about Morpher. We'll talk about Rook. If you're looking for single player survivability, that's what I would recommend way before this class. The biggest advantage, honestly, to Cleric is the PvP setting. Now, if you are super whale, you can heal extremely well. But I'm not going to go over any of that stuff. I personally am just going to show you a guild battle set because it's basically going to be the same as it's basically going to be the same as what you would normally run. But as you can see, I used to main Cleric, so I have just a little bit of insight, I suppose. Pious Wish, fantastic ability. Gives you status and element resistance. Can't really go wrong with that. Now, if you're running PvE, or even some PvP, Silver Guidance, fantastic ability. This ability The reason why this ability is so strong is because it's 0 cost, which means that even if you have no cost, if you're rejected, if you can't move with any other class, clerics can move. It's just so good. It's just so good. And you can also proc a prohibit unison on the target that you hit, so that even if they do have 100 uni, they can't uni. So it can be really strong, but I wouldn't recommend it. Because the chances of you landing this prohibit unison are really low. And honestly, you don't really have cost problems, because clerics have lots of ways of costing. If you wanted to attack, I would recommend playing a different class. Gospel heal, basically your standard heal, and it heals CP, which is one of the only moves in the game that can heal CP. Circle of Innocence protects or basically removes all buffs from your allies in an AoE, so you can save 3 people from not being able to move, which gives them a great strength in guild battles, because you'll uni a lot in guild battles, and a lot of guilds want to set up lockdowns so that the entire team can't move. Your entire team can't move. Clerics have a base ability. They have a couple of these, actually. They have a basic thing that increases their status ailment resistance. So they have higher base status ailment resistance if you main slot a status ailment resistance monster, something like this guy, something that gives you additional status ailment resistance in your main slot. Then you can protect yourself against that stuff, and when your entire team gets locked down, you can use Circle of Innocence and save the entire team. It's a super clutch ability, super strong, would recommend. Now Holy Circle is the last ability that I would recommend, and that's just because it gives your entire team cost. One of the biggest disadvantages in guild battles is that you start with low cost. This gives you a lot of cost for your entire team. It doesn't give you anything for cost, but it gives your entire team lots of cost, so they should be able to do their job. Now, if they don't do their job, kick them or leave the guild. I don't know what else to say about that. They just suck. If they suck ass, I can't help you. But but you did your job. So that's clerics. Unfortunately, clerics not the strongest. Wouldn't recommend playing for fun unless you really like playing support classes. But if you like playing support classes, honestly, why would you not play Rook? Rook is just a better cleric, and you actually do damage for PvE, for PvP, and even occasionally in guild battles. Now, a lot of guilds will still run a cleric and a Rook, because Rooks don't cleanse all of the special debuffs like clerics do. But for damage and for overall enjoyment, most people, if you're running a supportish, if you like that supportish style, I'd recommend playing a Rook. You'll find a lot more satisfaction with Rook. So Rooks scale off of defense and magic defense. So remember how I was talking about how attack and magic attack get a % cut to their damage, to their stats when you're attacking? Yeah, Rooks don't have that problem. They have a different problem, which is a lot of their stuff costs a lot, and their abilities are slow, and their abilities have high cooldown times, and they also don't hit a lot of times either. This one only hits twice. I mean, their highest hitting move is this one, which only hits 4 times. But look at the ability power. It's so weak. So they get their own disadvantage. But on the other end of the spectrum, because you're scaling with defense and magic defense, you get 10 slots to increase your defense and magic defense twice. So you get 20 slots between your helms and your armors to increase your stats, which gives Rook the potential to be the highest damage dealing class in the game. The biggest disadvantage to Rook, honestly, is that you can't play any other class besides Rook. The amount of investment that you would have to invest in your monsters to play a really good Rook, unfortunately speaking, you would need all of your monsters to be like this, defense and magic defense up here. And in order to be like max damage Rook, and unfortunately because that would be the case, you can't really play any other class. And you'll be basically putting all of your infusion gems into your armors and your helms, which also is not damage, and no other class can benefit from those stats. So there's a potential that you can swap between soldier and Rook, or Cleric and Mage and Rook, if you're running a book Cleric. But if that's the case, then you're not going to have great defense. You're just going to be, you would run something like this, right? Which is the only ability that scales off of attack and magic attack for Rooks, but it does high ability power, and it attacks 4 times. They have 2 abilities that do that. They have one for the soldiers, one for the clerics. But if you're wanting to go all in on Rook, you would go all in on defense and magic defense. And for your free-to-play players, if you want to play high-level PvE, Rook is the class. There is no better class for PvE and being free-to-play, because you don't need to spend tons of infusion gems on all the weapons in order to do great damage. You can use the same armors for every single class. You just swap out your weapons, and they don't even need to be max infused. So it gives them a great advantage that way. So let me build a PvE set for you. I'll just throw on this guy and this guy. This one heals yourself, doesn't do a lot of, it only hits twice and doesn't do much else. But this one hits 4 times and heals everyone. So this is a great ability. Your noble conviction costs a lot more HP, but gives you more cost than most other classes, and it cleanses you. And then for PvE, I like running Justice because it cleanses you, and it's a really fast ability. And then lastly, I'm gonna run, one of these 2, honestly. I think I would probably run this one because it heals your entire team and prevents damage from like one time to your team. That's what I would run for PvE. For PvP, you want to use Devoted Sacrifice, this one, because it gives your entire team a shield and none of you can die for 5 seconds. It's unbelievably strong. And because you're basically taking the damage for your team, after this, you're going to be left with 1 HP. So what do? Immortal Heart, which prevents you from dying for 7 seconds. And it's also a really fast ability. And now that you have survived death twice, what are you going to do? Probably this, or either Lucian Veil or Revitalization area. Either one of those, and then I just run like 1 damaging ability. And then like for an aura, I would run something like, let's see if I can find it. This guy I know has one. Something like this, Gold Bash, which gives defense and magic defense. And this is a weapon. This weapon you can get from doing the main quest. So you do have some ability to get that. Now, if you're running Guild Battle, you would basically be running this same set here, except for you would throw off Immortal Heart because your team is going to be uniting when you clash. And in order to make up for that fact, you're going to be running an additional damaging ability. So I'd probably throw in something like this. And you would have Gold Bash as well. And I would probably replace this with Cheer. Now, if you feel like you are running low on your your cost, then I would recommend swapping this out for probably this. This is a pretty standard set. It depends a lot on your team. White Charm is also fan-freaking-tastic for PvE. Can be good for PvP, but not necessarily, and not really great for guild battle, but it can be. I mean, if only 2 people on your team get buffs and one of them is a Rook, then when the other 3 allies swap in for your crystal assault, then you can give your entire team buffs, even though they weren't there for the uni. So can be extremely strong. Alrighty, let's go to Berserker. Alrighty, Berserker has way too many things to cover because they can scale different things based off of your dual blades, so axes, size, guns, staves, relics, and swords, lances, bows, books, dual blades. They basically scale everything. It's pretty annoying, but I'll show you some of the best moves to run, just in general. So let me start off by saying this is not a PvE class. Do not play this class in PvE. If you play this class in PvE, do not be surprised if you get kicked from every party. Do not be surprised if you die often. Do not be surprised if you do no damage, because there is no dual scaling abilities that scale with defense or magic defense, and almost all of Berserker's abilities deal damage to yourself in the form of % HP reduction. So even the best players in the game would never play this class in PvE. We're not even going to discuss PvE further because it is so awful. Please stop playing this class in PvE. Alrighty, now that we're done with that, I'll go over Scythe because it's one of the ones I'm familiar with most, and I'll also go over the other class, if I could fucking remember what I'm talking about. Purgatory. Show me Purgatory. Staff or Relic right here. Yeah. Okay. So I'll discuss the Staff and Relic one as well as the Scythe. So when you're running Scythe, you're basically running damage. Attack, I mean. So Recurring Nightmare. This is your ability, cost gaining ability. And it is also a bop ability. You are slapping your enemy with a physical attack when you use this ability, so you can kill with it. Rage Pain, great ability to cover some of your bases. I would also recommend Earthquake. It is one of the strongest abilities in the entire game, and it pierces, damage reflection, and damage reduction. You get like 1.6 mil attack on a Berserker, and there's nothing that can save them except for a null. I mean, it's just absolutely devastating. And then there is one more. I think it is this one. Yes. Yeah, I think it's Heart Sacrifice, if I remember correctly. Apologies, it has been a long time since I played this, but basically what you're going to do is you're going to start off with Furor, which I didn't go over yet. Most of the time you're going to start off with Furor, and this is going to give you Frenzy, which gives you piercing against damage reflection and damage reduction, and then you can use any of your abilities and they will slap. And most people will use something like Furor into Heart of Sacrifice or Mocking Blade, which is another great ability. And they will just instantly kill somebody because the only way to prevent it is if you null. And then they'll run Earthquake. I've even seen, because all of these abilities damage yourself, I've even seen the Scythe version of Berserker run Cleric abilities to heal themselves so that they keep using abilities, because you cannot use these abilities if you don't have HP. This consumes 30% of your HP. You don't have 30% of your HP, you can't use this move. Berserkers are they're something. But they do a ton of damage in PvP. I would recommend trying them out. They're a lot of fun. Let me show you what I would use for the other one. Now, if you're looking to kill somebody, there is no better combination of abilities. Oh, Guard's a great ability as well to throw in here. There's no better ability combination than Furor and Purgatorium. And the reason why is because this will give you damage. This will give you piercing on damage reflection and damage reduction. This one, Purgatorium, gives you penetrates, nullification, and invulnerability, which means the only way to prevent you from dying if somebody Furors and Purgatoriums you is to guard. And you just pray that they don't double proc and slap the shit out of you with a 1.7, 1.6 mil magic attack stats. I mean, if they just have enough stats, they could just kill you straight off the bat. I mean, there's a reason if you're playing Cleric, or sorry, if you're playing Berserker in Colosseum, that you just die first because you are a threat. If you're running this, I would recommend these abilities. Purgatorium and Furor are basically all you need. If you wanted to run a third ability, you run Kill Dance, not because it's good, but because it is memey. It is the fun ability of this shit, because it attacks random enemies. And it is extremely fast, and it hits a lot of times. And if you use it multiple times in a row, it actually combos with itself. So what you can do is you can Kill Dance into Kill Dance again, and some abilities, if you kill somebody, it'll automatically refresh your abilities. So if you have Unied, and then you can just Kill Dance, and you can kill the entire enemy team really, really fast, and it is a super fun ability. If you're looking to win, don't use this. And occasionally you'll see the Furor Purgatorium in guild battles. That's basically the only reason that you would run it, a Berserker in guild battles. Are Berserkers good in guild battles? They have some good abilities. There is an ability that they have, that they recently got, I believe, that reduces the enemy's Unison gauge gains, or Unison, by quite a bit. Oh, this one frails, which is fantastic. It basically means that your defensive proc stop working. So that's good. I mean, if the enemies can't defensively proc, they die. Yeah. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, this one's a really good one if you're running a yeah, this is the one. This is the one, because it prevents Unison gauge gains, applies pressure state, which basically means they can't swap out in the guild battle. It does fill them, which is not good, but depending on what they have, it won't really matter. But it it decreases. Now, I'm not sure actually if this is for you. This might actually be decreases your Unison. Honestly, Berserkers aren't really played for any other reason, like I talked about, besides the Purgatorium. I know that they have some other memey abilities, but most of them are really detrimental to yourself. For example, Suicide Bullet literally removes your own Unison. Just horrible for guild battle. All right, now we're going to Treasure Hunter. Treasure Hunter is probably the weirdest class, because the only reason that you would run this in PvE is if you wanted the end reward, because they have a chance, in this one, they have a 25% chance to get double end rewards when you're done with a quest. It's not really necessary most of the time, but there are instances where it is really beneficial. Like if the end reward is a gem, then you want to run Treasure Hunters because you can get the gem. Besides that, you basically never see them in PvE, so please stop playing them in PvE if it's not necessary. And in PvP, they're probably one of, if not the best classes, because they build Unison the fastest in the game. And for guild battles, they're basically required. And that is because their abilities are really fast, really cheap, and they get Mind of Clover and Vigil. Sorry, not Vigil. Lionheart. Both of these increase the entire team's Unison Gauge gains. So basically, if you're running, this is going to be a PvE and a this is going to be a PvP Coliseum and guild battle set. I would recommend talking with your guild members to create a better set, because this is not the end-all be-all by any means. But run something like this and you're gonna be good. So you would probably run another ability. You wouldn't have both of these. I'm just gonna drop this one for now, and not Lunatic Dagger, Thievery. There you go, that one's fine. Yeah. So let's talk about the abilities. So you got two abilities. Shadow Snatch, which reduces the enemy's cost. The enemies can't kill you or gain Unison unless they have cost or cheer, but we don't talk about that. So removing the enemy's cost is super important. It also gives you cost, so you can keep slapping bitches. Super important. Also, Thievery, same thing. You gain cost, they lose cost. What could go wrong? Basically nothing. You can use EE. I don't think it's necessary in most cases. I'm throwing it on there because let's say that two enemy treasure hunters both attack you, you could be reduced and not have enough. So to use your ability. So if you're racing, you just want to attack as fast as possible to get as much Unison as possible. And then I'm running Lionheart as well. You would normally have somebody else Lionheart you, but this is just a general set. And now for being super specific, you would also have, which I don't think, yeah, no, let me put on this ability. You're going to have one of these, and the procs that you're looking for are something like this. Something that fills Unison, because when you attack, you want to gain Unison. So the faster you gain Unison, the more of these procs you equip. You just equip all of them, okay? And you're also looking for something like this, which is a fantastic ability that basically increases your allies, like 3 people on your team, their Unison gauge, which is basically another cheer. View it as another cheer. So yeah, this is a pretty good set. There are so many things that you can do with this. Cancel's great in a lot of instances because it cancels Rook's Divine Shield. Vigil can be really good. There's just, like, if you're running dual attack, you can dual attack. Mind of Clover for Unison gauge gains, and you can run Mind of Clover, and Lionheart. Mind of Clover gets rid of like Lancers, Lions. So there's so much here. You can also run like Unison sharing. There's honestly so much, but you would only ever play treasure hunters if you're looking to be an asshole in Coliseum and just uni and hit them with tons of status ailments, or you're in guild battle in your front line, which is where it's super important. Alrighty. The last two I'm going to go over pretty quickly. Ninjas. Pretty strong. Pretty expensive. Very flexible. Overall, I wouldn't recommend for newer players because of how many abilities they have. However, they can be extremely strong for some PvE, some PvP. If you're running, I'm just going to create a general set. Cloud Cutter is one of the highest damage abilities in the game, and it scales off of attack and magic attack is what we're looking for. Attack and magic attack for this as well, and we're going to run Smoke Bomb because it protects your team from getting killed by magic and blinds. The enemies can't kill you if they can't see you. And then I'm also going to run this one because of the nullification bonus. And then I'm going to run Wind Shear. Wind Shear is a fantastic ability because it does Divine Shield. It removes Divine Shield. So if you have a Rook on the enemy team that's trying to protect their entire team, boom, Wind Shear, no Divine Shield, now they can die. It also reduces their Unison Gauge gains by 5. So if you do no damage to them and you just Wind Sheared the entire enemy team, they went from 100 Unison to 95 in your team community. Super powerful, really, really fast ability. It's probably one of the, if not the fastest ability. Well, I don't think it's the fastest ability in the game, but it's one of the fastest abilities in the entire game. So you're going to press this button to get to the other form. Again, same thing. Nullification is probably best. I'm going to run Toad because it stuns. It does cost a lot, but we can fix that. And it also removes cost, which is super important for PvE. For PvP and for guild battles. I'm also going to run Serpent because it is a unison down and it applies Despair, which, if I remember correctly, means that if the enemies try to use a unison gauge gaining ability, it'll actually decrease their unison instead of increasing it. We love to see that. Heat Haze is a unison gauge reducing ability, so fantastic. And it also reduces their status ailment resistance, which means that they can be hit by more stuff, which is what we want to see. And I don't have a dual blade in main slots. Let me fix that real quick. And then you're gonna equip this ability. And Tetsu. All right, and Shadow Clone, that's your unison, your cost gaining ability, because they have so many abilities that cost a lot. Look at this: 25, you know, and then Wind Cutter 18. I have 2. I have Ether Exchange on one side and Shadow Clone on the other. And then I'm also just gonna run this one. It's a nice flexible ability for all your PvE stuff. So you're basically never going to use this half for PvP. You're only going to use these abilities. There's no reason really to use much else besides that. Maybe throw in this, but for PvP and guild battles, you're using these. Ninjas are super versatile. They just don't have enough damage in order to push you over the top. If they had more damage, they would be probably the best class in the entire game, at least in my opinion, which is completely unbiased and is correct. Alrighty, so the last class that we're going to go over is Morpher. Let me just equip something. So Morphers have 2 different forms. First form is the unmorphed form. This is where you gain your cost. Because your morphed form is really expensive, you're going to gain cost, and you can have a lot of cost. So I'm going to throw in some super fast abilities. These are basically just to gain cost. That's it. And this looks good. I mean, there's not much else that you're going to use. There's lots of like, ooh, shiny abilities. But honestly, you're not even doing damage in this form, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, of course, if you want to do more damage, throw on a better ability. Like these gain more cost. But this is what I would use, something like that. And we're gonna absolutely grab Ether Exchange, which should not be here. Now it should be there. All right. So now once you have morphed, you will be in the morpher state for a certain amount of time, depending on which morph state you use. I like this one because I get to stay in morph longer, but it does cost more. This one, you can get down to lower, but I personally prefer this form. Alrighty. There are 2 different forms for most morphers. You're either going to be running a soldier morpher and running attack and defense, and for that you're going to be using You're going to be using Shield Smash. This is your 0-cost ability. Shining Smash. You're going to be using Shining Strike. Every single Morpher always needs Shining Aura. Please, if you are playing a Morpher, use Shining Aura. It gives you tension. Tension is one of the best abilities in the entire game. It is incredibly strong. Basically, what it does is the more abilities that you have, or the more stats that you have, like if you have attack buff and defense buff and magic defense buff, and the more buffs you have, the more damage tension will add to your damage. If you want to do massive damage, you need tension. So that's what makes Morphers so strong in PvE. PvE is where they really shine. They're really weak in PvP, and in guild battles, if they're attacking the crystal, they can be really strong, but in all other cases, they're pretty weak. So you're basically always running Shining Aura. It's also a really good ability. I mean, it heals your team, and you just can't go wrong with Shining Aura. Now for your damaging abilities, your main damage is going to be the Shining Strike and this one, Hopeful Burst. They both do really good damage. As long as these are going to be your two main damaging abilities, and then Shining Smash is if you run out of cost. Morphers are extremely strong, probably the strongest PvE class in the entire game, just for how much damage they add to your team. And if you're running a magic, like a cleric version of the same stuff, you're going to be running Angelic Judgment, you're going to be running Shining Shoot and Shining Bomber. This is basically the setup, and the reason why I have an empty slot here is you can fill it in with whatever you feel like you need. Do you need more healing? Go more healing. If you need individual healing or cleansing, you can go something like balancing to remove enemy buffs. You can go something like recover to single target heal. You can go something, if you're doing Mobius, maybe you want to run Devoted Strike to attack the entire enemy team. You know, it's a really flexible class because you have so many ability slots. Honestly, the biggest disadvantage to Morpher is that their abilities cost a lot. I mean, look at that. 30 cost for this one, 20 cost for this one, 15 cost for this one. So that's why you have the pre-morph phase, because you want to pre-morph, and then you want to gain as much cost as you can. You want to morph, and then because morph costs a lot as well, costs 40, and for this one I believe you can mark it down, or for this one you can mark it down. For one of them you can mark it down, but they still cost quite a bit, and then you're going to want to gain. You want to gain cost here, and then once you morph, you're going to be doing the massive damage. Can you play an Archer Morpher? Technically, yes. Would I recommend it? Probably not. I mean, this one scales with attack, defense, magic attack, and magic defense, but you're going to have to be a super mega whale to make this work. And honestly, the only other ability that's kind of fun is Rainbow Flare, which is a super slow ability, but it does slap pretty hard in PvP. It doesn't do anything in PvE, so please stop using it in PvE, but for PvP, it's a pretty fun ability. Overall, though, this class sucks for PvP, purely because it's a super slow class. All the abilities take a long time. It doesn't lock down Unison or anything like that. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it for PvP. But for guild battles, if you're in the back line, if you're just attacking crystal, you can argue that it's really good because of tension. I mean, just tension alone is really good. But the dual scaling ability, I mean, look at how much ability power these attacks have. They're incredible abilities. So I would highly recommend trying Morpher, giving it a shot. My biggest complaint with Morpher is that when you're running on auto, you could stay in your pre-morph phase for a year, and it is annoying. Besides that, I mean, I love Morphers. They do incredible damage, fantastic class. If you're looking to play a class, just a quick overview, I would personally recommend playing a soldier or playing a mage cleric with books and relics. And the reason why is because you can play soldier. You can for a soldier, you can play soldier, you can play morpher, you can play berserker, and those are some of the most important classes for damage in the game. And for mages and clerics, if you're running book cleric, you can run book cleric, you can run, or relic, you can run mage with time spellbook, you can run morpher, you can run rook, you can run berserker. So all of the main classes, there is really no other reason to run any of those, in my opinion. Those would be what I would recommend to almost everyone. If you can't find something that you love in those classes with those setups, that's a rough one. I would recommend maybe trying Archer or Lancer secondary. My favorite class is Rook, just because of how versatile it is and how easy it is to play, and how cheap it is to play. But Morpher is also a really good class that I would recommend. I mean, Morpher and Rook are basically tied for my favorite classes. If you're looking for a great class that you can play basically everything, Soldier is the one. For basically years now, Soldier has been played in every single format for everything. Just keep in mind, Soldier can be a little bit more expensive than some of the other classes, depending on what you're using. So, but a soldier is gonna cost the same as a book relic cleric. So at that point, I would recommend trying soldier, trying mage, trying morpher, trying rook. Those would be where I would start. But yeah, if you have any other questions, I'm gonna be going over how to build an actual setup for all of them later. So yeah, thank you very much. See ya.